Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Mastena Nazarian, who is an Alexander Technique teacher in Melbourne, Australia. She has a teaching practice that includes people from all ages and walks of life, but she does specialize a bit in alleviating pain and anxiety issues. And Mastena is also a parent. She has a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And we're going to talk today about a process that she's developed, which she calls in tune parenting, which is some ideas about how, I assume, how to make parenting a little easier for parents. Mastena, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Could you just to tell our listeners very briefly what the Alexander Technique is?
Sure. One definition is it allows us to do everything with more ease by giving us a process through which we can see what our habitual responses are and giving us a system for making new choices or expanding our sort of repertoire in
Hmm.
how we react. Yeah.
And just from my own experience of parenting somewhat older children, both those qualities are highly desirable ones.
Mm.
Um, and maybe you could begin by telling us a little about your in tune parenting system, if we want to
Sure.
call it that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Okay.
I've got it down pat. I know exactly what's going to happen in every moment for the next 20 years.
Wow, that is so amazing.
It's an amazing thing being a mom or being a dad. It's I'm always learning how it's amazing in different ways than I thought it would be amazing.
Hmm.
So one of the things I did recently, I had a pretty intensive training where I was by myself in a room of about 75 to 100 people practicing martial art. It went on for about 6 days, maybe about 4 or 5 hours a day. I didn't see my kids. And I realized that they really helped me focus. They really helped me focus my intentions. And I had this vision of little memory, I suppose, when I gave birth and they came out, and I sort of looked at them and going like, yeah, what's going on here? All right. And what seemed to be happening was they were asking me to take care of my basic needs and
Hmm.
continue to learn. And I realized, it's a process of realizing really that love wasn't really one of those things. It's like learning was more important. So
Hmm.
learning to learn with them was more important than sort of showering them with stuff or getting nervous whether I'm going to repeat my parents' mistakes or,
Hmm.
getting in this situation that I have myself gotten as a parent where I'm going like, oh my God, did I just make a mistake? Oh no.
Right.
So that focusing on learning with them because that's what they come out they want to do. They got to learn to develop their nervous system. They got to learn, develop themselves to such a point that they can be socializing.
Well,
Because that's,
wouldn't that be an expression of love?
oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm sort of thinking, taking care of, them sort of having this, being in this infantile stage. And obviously I'm driven to, well, for me, I was driven to, yes, I'm going to take care of your basic needs. But if I focus on uh, giving you love, then I might, in a stressful situation, I might forget that I'm actually here to learn.
Hmm.
And the learning is sort of supersedes that fixation on having to be perfect and having to be whatever that means,
Hmm. Hmm.
and having to provide everything perfectly all the time because I love you. And how could I ever, you'd raise my voice and wait a minute. If I just focus on learning, both for myself and also with the child,
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding that it's giving me better outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Could
Um,
could you give maybe an example of
yeah,
a
yeah,
specific incident that would illustrate that?
sure. A specific incident it took a couple of years, well, it took a season or two for my younger one to realize what what we meant by cold day or a hot day
Mm-hmm.
in relation to what was appropriate to wear for that day. And I'm sure that will come around again when she's 15.
Right, I'm sure.
But but
In ways you never expected.
um, so after a few weeks and a few days of standing there and getting all frustrated because I love the child and how could I possibly let them wear a t-shirt in a cold day and because I love them, couldn't let this happen. It's going, well, this is not working because I'm just getting tight in my voice, in doing funny things with my eyes. I'm not really hearing her. Not sensing how I am. I'm getting all kind of twisted. And I realized that she's learning about something, and I need to learn how to learn with her. She's learning about how to push boundaries. She's learning about how to socialize and be independent. So I think she was about three, that 2 or 3 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized okay, as a parent, as an adult, I can always pack her the extra clothes, and as soon as we exit the sunny apartment, she'll get a whiff of the wind and put the sweater on. So this just got a lot easier. We didn't fight. There was no sort of wasted time in the morning, sort of me yelling at her, she's screaming, and all of this stuff. I realized that I needed to not focus on what it meant for me to love her and protect her. I just needed to notice what she was experimenting with. I learned to respond in such a way that she learned and I learned that there was different choices available to me than having to leave the front door dressed appropriately because I live in an apartment, which is great. I have 3 flights of stairs to make that
Right.
make that known to her that look, now you're gonna sense the temperature on you. You're gonna put on the sweater. And this just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the end of the world when we were yelling at her for 5 minutes, trying to prove to myself that I had love for you, child, while
Right.
getting all twisted up and screaming at you. That's not really an expression of love. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I mean. Being available for learning can then create an experience of that caring and taking care of basic needs and all of the things mentioned before. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer.
It's kind of it almost sounds like a very practical version of love.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of all of the instruments made by Stradivarius,
Mm-hmm.
most of them are locked up somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But they were made to be loved. But because of accidents in history, and we think they're the best, and they have incredibly high values, they have to be stored. Where really they were made to be loved and played with. Um, so I've got a few little, become a little principal person.
Mm-hmm. Let's hear them.
I've,
How many
yeah,
principles we got?
you got five. You
Five
got five. Yeah,
principles.
yeah.
Okay.
And the parents listening to that might come up with a few of their own, or they might not be able to relate to all of them. But it just comes out of my curiosity of how I can be a better learner as a parent.
Okay.
Because I realize that every action that I make as a parent is can be based on habit, or it can be based on uh, being present and making informed choices about what's actually going on rather than projecting my own judgment on it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes for me, parenting has been ruled by either fear of getting it right, guilt, guilt about what I missed out on and what I don't want my kids to miss out on, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
and also anger, um, whether what I'm going to do is going to make them angry, or whether when I'm experiencing anger, do I have to respond in that way? So it doesn't have to. Parenting, what I want to mention, they've done research on this. I heard um, they printed it in different places, but in the New Yorker magazine, I ran into this article that parenting is actually doesn't make us happy. So that's news for anyone. It's not here to make us happy because this
Right.
is what parents said. It's like it makes me time poor, all of this stuff. It's a stressful situation and whatnot. So how can I make this more positive?
Hmm.
So if it's not here to make me happy, what is it here to do then? Why did I have this curiosity to take the plunge and have kids anyway? So I realized that if I focus, it might sound selfish, but if I focus it back on me, it's here to teach me something. Then I've got more choices. So it's this sort of circle of if I just get out of my own way and realize that at this moment when I've got all these responsibilities over me, I'm not here to be happy. I'm here to learn. It's like a paradigm shift.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and
And of
it's
course, if you, to the extent that you're successful in that shift, your children are going to benefit from that.
well, see, exactly. See, this is one of the principles. It's a symbiosis
Right.
that mind, my mind and body, their mind and body, children have this incredible ability to be well coordinated and focused, even if they're angry, even if they're crying, even if they're sad. It goes beyond their emotional state. So
Hmm.
they're able to be well coordinated, even in a dire, shall we say, situation.
Hmm.
And then I realized that actually their situation is just where they need to be to learn something. It's not like just because they're crying, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, you know? So it's a learning from their coordination and also learning that if I'm taking myself a into a stressed out, wired up, discoordinated, tense place,
Hmm.
that's the response I'm going to get. They're just these fantastic mirrors,
Right.
you know.
They
And it's
absolutely.
funny because Alexander himself used mirrors to learn from. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like they're maybe I should have three kids because Alexander had three mirrors. But it's I've got these two mirrors, and the way I respond with them, so that informs how I'm responding to myself. So that's
Right.
the first. That's the first one. The second one we mentioned before is learning before loving. So rather than showering them with this sort of like, oh yeah, look at everyone's gonna see how much I love my kids by packing all this stuff into their lunch, rather than saying, asking them what they want in their lunch, and just what did they have yesterday? Oh, okay, I should put less of this. Oh, my daughter's losing her teeth now. So she has low appetite. So not packing all this food, creating wastage at the end of the day because I had to express my love.
Right. Right.
So that's another example. And this third one kind of relates to the first one about symbiosis is 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And I saw the teachers doing that. And I think actually my daughter would say, no, mommy, it's eyes on me. And then the kids say 1, 2, 3. So it's using rhyme and using little tags, little hooks helps all parties to expand their sensory awareness.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it sort of it's like if I read about this somewhere. You're not always that your child will not always respond to you to you when you're using words. You might actually have to get their eye contact and show them, little hand gestures about what do you want, as in like put on your shoes,
Right. Right.
or go over them and put a hand in their back and say,
Hmm.
get their attention in different ways, and
Well.
that obviously helps the parent notice what they're doing with themselves, whether they can be a little bit more aware, not jump to conclusions about, oh my God, they're never going to put their shoes on and we're going to be late to
Right.
school again. Not do that. So it's kind of a little cue. You can be different parents around the world can use different cues, make them up as you go along, change them. One, two, three eyes on me is not going to work when they're 15.
Nope.
But the concept will, I think.
Hmm.
It might be a line from their favorite song. I don't know. It's just we'll have to wait and see what happens. And number four, it's based on the latest research in neuroplasticity,
All right.
is 50% rule. Don't get it right. If my parents did what they could to provide me with my basic needs 50% of the time, that's actually good.
Hmm.
So it helps undo some of my own perceptions about what my parenting should have been like, and it wasn't. And again, I'm taking myself into judgment. If I'm experience my parenting judgmentally, then I'm probably bound to use uh, too many judgments in my own parenting with my kids. Um, the fifth one is just making a connection and being available to the experience. I think that probably overrides or sort of encapsulates all of these things is that being available to the experience, and even when things are really stressful, they're going to change the next moment,
Hmm.
and again and again and again. And if I'm committed to learning, um, then I have more choices. So I'm not defined by those difficult moments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
I'd like to tie a couple of things you said into um, tie a couple into some basic Alexander technique ideas.
right.
Um, the part where you said you need to maybe show them with your hands or gestures or some other way other than words.
Mm,
That comes up all the time in classical Alexander technique teaching. A teacher uses his or her hands to supplement the verbal instruction because adults aren't necessarily going to understand the words you're using either.
exactly. Yeah.
So a supplementary way of conveying information can be very helpful, and that's something that anyone with any experience with the Alexander technique would instantly recognize. And I think what you've done
Mm,
is kind of applied that principle
mm.
to a non-typical Alexander technique student, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing, right?
they're definitely
Right.
my teachers. And one thing, surprisingly, there's a fantastic video made by Barbara Conable that you probably know about called "Move Well, Avoid Injury." And surprisingly, as a family, we love watching it.
Hmm.
They really,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, they really respond to it. And I've got a book put out by Barbara Conable and her husband on learning about your body as a musician, and it's very visual based. And
Right.
on every week I changed a different page, and my
Hmm.
son, who's pretty fluent at reading, he'll come up and read the bit about the hip joint, and then we'll
Wow.
talk
Yeah.
about the hip joint as it relates to what he loves to do,
Right.
running,
So
chasing after the
he's read
ball.
it and he's looked at images of it too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
That's the
we,
thing that's I think
yeah,
important. And I just want to we're kind of beginning towards the end of our time, but there's one thing I'd like to comment on. The example you gave of trying to force your daughter to wear warm clothes
mm,
when it was cold out, and how in the past you'd get all upset and yell at her and probably tense up, right?
mm,
Um, and you said, well, kids can tense up too, but um, they they can have pretty good use of themselves even when they're angry or upset. But I would
mm,
also say that if you're in a tense situation a lot of the time, they're
yeah,
going to pick up on that pretty quickly too.
yes,
And then it's not going to be it's going to start to actually affect them,
absolutely.
their own physical selves. And Alexander, um, in one of the more kind of intriguing, to me anyway, sections of one of his books, talks about the problems or the issue of how to choose a nanny for your child.
Oh yeah, I remember
And
seeing
he
that.
says, the average person just goes out and gets the cheapest one, right?
Yes.
And I mean, apart from the fact that it could be a career criminal or whatever, but apart from that, what Alexander made the point he wanted to make is that when you're choosing someone to hang out with your kids many hours a day, you
Yep.
want someone who's going to have a pretty good, pretty well organized physical mechanism, because the kids are going to get a lot of information from just watching that person.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, if they're being held by that person, they're going to get information that way as well.
Yeah.
And he also makes the point, which I think is a fascinating one. He says not only are kids fantastic mimickers of people around them, but they go for the most weird and bizarre. I mean, if someone's doing something out of the ordinary, they're going to grab onto that right away. So if
Yes.
you're tightening your neck or hunching your shoulders or breathing more shallowy, more with not as full breathing, they're going to immediately grab that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that ties in with, you're saying, well, when I focused on just loving them, I got all tense. And when I focused more on just, well, we'll just take some extra clothes and let the situation unfold,
Yep.
you were actually doing them, I think, a favor on many levels. Not just learning about cold weather, but also not having as many experiences of observing you with excess tension in your body.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
That's
it's
that's
kind of,
right. Yeah.
I just
And
wanted to throw that out. Yeah.
that's a really really excellent point. And I think in choosing their childcare, uh, obviously there's a group of people who are working with the children,
Hmm.
but I made sure I picked a situation, a childcare center, where the care was child focused and also the it was non-for-profit, so all the monies went into taking care, making sure the staff was well provided for.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's different paradigms, at least in Australia. These are the ones I know about.
Right.
You can go to a place where they just pack them in, profit, profit, profit.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to get a place where there's low turnover of staff and the staff are provided for. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And you
so
want, and I would imagine, even apart from sort of the wanting to do well by the staff, that the atmosphere in those sorts of
exactly,
places is probably quite different, and that
exactly.
atmosphere translates into physical tension, and
Yep.
kids will suck it up right
Mm,
away,
mm,
especially if it's bizarre. So
mm.
it really does suggest a very practical way of making sure your kids have the best experience, even when you're not around. I
Yes,
think
yes.
that's an important factor. Well, I think we need to come to an end here. My guest has been Mastena Nazarian, who's an Alexander Technique teacher in Melbourne, Australia. If what we've been talking about intrigues you, we'll put a link to her website by the interview. And if you live anywhere else in the world, I'll put a link to a website that will tell you more about the Alexander Technique and also enable you to locate a teacher in your area. Mastena, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Robert.